That evening, after concluding dinner, I felt perspiration drenching my back. I resolved to take a shower to feel more at ease. The bathroom was compact, and the tepid water cascading over my skin felt soothing and agreeable. Upon completing my shower, I selected a delicate beige frock that I typically donned at home, a V-neck garment with an extended zipper at the rear. I entered the bedroom to put it on. As I tugged the zipper upward, I discovered it was jammed midway, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't budge it. Initially, I glanced around in bewilderment, planning to summon my husband for assistance, but upon entering the living room, only the faint light revealed my father-in-law seated. Hearing my steps, he glanced up, his gaze slightly astonished. "Where might Aiden be, Zelda?" I inquired, my tone somewhat uncertain. "Aiden just stepped out, likely to purchase some items." "Is something amiss?" His voice remained composed. I nibbled my lip. In this predicament, I had no alternative. My dress zipper is jammed. "Could you assist me?" I requested, feeling awkward. Upon hearing this, he placed his teacup on the table, rose, and approached. "Allow me to inspect," he said, standing directly behind me. I could sense our proximity, his breath lightly brushing the nape of my neck, making me somewhat anxious. He carefully grasped the zipper, his brow slightly furrowed. "It appears to be caught in the material," he remarked, his hand beginning to tug at it. I heard a faint click, and then everything transpired swiftly. The zipper slid down abruptly. The smooth silk dress dropped to my feet instantly. I stood frozen, as if time had halted. The breeze from the window blew in, chilling my skin. "Greetings, everyone. I am Leah, 28 years of age. I have been wedded to Aiden for 3 years. Our marital life appears flawless on the surface. A charming home, steady employment, and financial stability. Aiden is a devoted family man, always caring for me. As for myself, I take pride in my burgeoning career, where I can exhibit my capabilities and find contentment in my daily tasks. We reside with my father-in-law, Mr. John, a man in his late 60s, robust and serene. He is an admirable individual whom I deeply respect. He not only fulfills the role of a father in our household, but also acts as a mediator whenever Aiden and I have disagreements. Our disputes primarily revolve around the topic of children. Aiden desires a more complete family with the laughter of children, but I am not prepared. I wish to concentrate on my career for a while, establish my personal aspirations before pausing to become a mother. Consequently, this matter has been a source of enduring debates. Nevertheless, these disagreements have never diminished our affection for one another. Aiden always patiently reasons, and I endeavor to clarify. After each dispute, my father-in-law gently intervenes and counsels us. He consistently emphasizes that family is about comprehending each other, and every issue can be resolved gradually. Thanks to him, Aiden and I always understand how to listen and yield to each other. I formerly believed that our life would proceed smoothly, but one evening, everything altered entirely. That day was as hectic as any other. In the morning, I awoke earlier than usual to prepare breakfast for the entire family. Aiden favored a simple breakfast, usually a slice of toast and a cup of black coffee. I also treated myself to a glass of warm milk to commence the day. My father-in-law, Mr. John, maintained the habit of perusing the newspaper while sipping a cup of tea each morning. The atmosphere in the house is always tranquil, warm, and filled with delightful aromas from the kitchen. After breakfast, I swiftly prepared to depart for work. Although my office duties were not overly demanding, they required a high level of focus. I donned a white blouse and refined trousers, along with light heels that boosted my confidence en route to the company. I halted at a nearby cafe to purchase another cup of latte as a treat before a lengthy day. The office that day was more bustling than usual. Back-to-back meetings left me with scarcely any time to relax. I strove to address each email, each report, and complete tasks promptly. However, I maintained an optimistic outlook because I recognized that this job was not merely a duty, but also my passion. When the clock struck 5 p.m., I gathered my documents and exited the company. Upon stepping onto the street, The gentle afternoon sunshine spread out, providing a sense of relief after a taxing day at work. I stopped by the supermarket near my residence to acquire some fresh provisions. Today, I wished to prepare a more delectable dinner than usual, as it had been a while since the entire family had the opportunity to dine together leisurely. Upon arriving home, I promptly headed to the kitchen. Aiden had just returned. He smiled and assisted me in setting the table. Steaming chicken soup, a platter of grilled salmon, and a serving of aromatic stir-fried vegetables were presented on the table. My father-in-law emerged from his study, beaming with contentment upon seeing the meal. We congregated, conversing and laughing during dinner. Despite minor disagreements about having children, family meals are always the most cherished moments for me. I did not anticipate that following that seemingly tranquil dinner, an unforeseen event would transform everything. Following dinner, I felt somewhat uncomfortable, so I retreated to the bathroom. The cool water alleviated the tension in my heart. After showering, I chose a cream-hued silk dress, my preferred attire with a zipper at the back. As I stood before the mirror to fasten it, I found the zipper stuck midway. I fumbled, but still couldn't secure it. I ventured into the living room, intending to seek Aiden's help, but the room was vacant. I turned and called, "Aiden, where are you?" There was no response. My father-in-law, seated and reading, glanced up. Aiden stepped out briefly. "What's going on?" I paused momentarily, but eventually said, my dress zipper is jammed. I can't pull it up. Could you assist me?" He set the book down and rose. "Allow me to examine it." He approached, his gaze as tranquil as ever. I turned slightly away, lowering my head to provide him easier access to the zipper. His hand, steady and strong, touched the zipper. "It appears to be caught in the fabric," he remarked, attempting to pull it up, but as he applied force, the zipper slid away with a soft swish, and the delicate dress slipped down, leaving me standing there frozen. We were both bewildered. I didn't know how to react, remaining motionless like a statue. He quickly turned away, his voice filled with remorse. "I'm sorry, I didn't intend to." I hastily picked up the dress, my hands trembling as I pulled it to cover my body. "It's all right, Dad. It's just that my dress is loose," I murmured, not daring to look up. He took a few steps back, trying to maintain his composure. "Fix it yourself. Let Aiden return and ask him for help." He turned around and exited swiftly, leaving me standing alone in the room. The atmosphere was oppressive and uncomfortable. I felt my heart racing, both embarrassed and confused. I couldn't focus on anything that evening. Each time I recalled Mr. John's apologetic gaze, I felt even more burdened. I didn't know what he was thinking, and this made me even more anxious. Aiden returned home late, seemingly unaware of what had transpired. He still smiled and chatted happily, not noticing my restlessness. I tried to act normally, but couldn't help feeling confused. In the days following that incident, I noticed that Mr. JN seemed to have changed. He no longer interacted with me as naturally as before, always trying to avoid my eyes whenever we accidentally met in the house. This made me feel uneasy, but I didn't know how to initiate a conversation to erase this awkwardness. However, there were times when I accidentally caught him staring at me, his eyes searching for something. At those moments, I quickly turned away, trying to stay calm, but my heart was in turmoil. I couldn't tell what he was thinking, and this made me even more worried. I told myself that everything would pass, that time would heal these invisible cracks, but I was wrong. That morning, I felt exhausted, my throat was sore, and my head was spinning. After taking my temperature, I knew I had a slight fever. Aiden had left home early to go to work, and I decided to take a day off to rest. My father-in-law was still at home, but as usual, he spent his time in the study reading books and newspapers or doing his own things. I lay in bed for a long time, feeling so tired that I couldn't do anything but try to sleep. But because the room was too hot, I decided to go out to the living room to find some cool air. I was wearing simple pajamas, my hair loose, my face pale from fever. When I entered the living room, I saw Mr. Jones sitting on the chair, staring intently at his phone screen. I said hello softly, but he didn't reply, just raised his head to look at me. His eyes were different now, no longer the usual calm eyes I was used to. "Are you not feeling well?" he asked, his voice deeper than usual. "Yes, I have a little fever, so I'm taking the day off," I replied, trying to keep my attitude normal. He didn't say anything more, just nodded, but his eyes were still fixed on me as if searching for something in my appearance. That feeling made me feel inexplicably uneasy. I was about to step outside to avoid this tense atmosphere, but as I turned around, I heard him call, "Leah, come here. I have something to tell you." I stopped, my heart clenched with a strange feeling. Mr. Jan stood up, his eyes full of determination, looking straight at me. The air in the room became heavy. I could feel my heart pounding, my palms sweating. "Leah, you are so beautiful," he said, his voice low and resonating in the silence. I froze in place, feeling as if my legs had lost all strength. My whole body was cold. Each word he uttered was like a knife cutting into my heart. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I asked, trembling. My voice choked, but he did not answer immediately. He stepped closer, each step making me feel as if the space around me was shrinking. His eyes stared straight at me, not moving away for a second. "Leah," he said, his voice soft but full of pressure, "can you let me see you again?" I stood there, not believing what I had just heard. My eyes widened, looking at him as if searching for a sign that he was joking, but he wasn't. His gaze was so serious that it made me speechless. "Dad," I almost shouted, trying to keep my composure. "How could you say such things? Don't you feel sorry for Aiden?" He paused, a look of confusion on his face, but his gaze never left me. "Leah, I don't know what happened to me," he said softly, his voice pleading. "Since that day, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." I stepped back, trying to keep my distance. "Dad, what you said is really wrong. You are destroying the relationship in this family. I am your daughter-in-law." "I know," he interrupted, his voice louder but quickly softened. "I know, but this feeling, I can't control it." "Dad," I screamed, my voice shaking, my eyes stinging. "I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't understand how you could say such things. I can't believe it." Mr. John stood still, his eyes lowered to the floor as if trying to fight some force within himself. The air in the room was heavy and suffocating. After a long moment, he sighed, his shoulders slumped, his voice soft but trembling. "Leah, I don't know why things turned out like this. I'm sorry, but I can't lie to myself anymore." I stood there, confused and panic rising in waves, but my legs felt like they were pinned down, unable to move. He stepped closer, each step slow but filled with pressure, his eyes fixed on me, filled with conflict and an unnameable sadness. I stepped back, but the small table behind me blocked my way, leaving me with no way to retreat. "I recognize this is askew," he persisted, his voice hushed yet distinct. "But this sensation, it genuinely terrifies me. I don't wish to injure you, but I can't cease pondering you since that day." I shrieked, my voice cracking with emotion. "Dad, do you grasp what you're articulating? We can't execute this. This is askew. It's going to obliterate everything." "I comprehend, Leah, I comprehend all of that. But I also comprehend I can't revert. You sense it too, correct?" His query was akin to a blade that pierced deep into my cognition. I shook my head, striving to repudiate it, but my physique refused to obey my intellect. His eyes were imploring, not with coercion but with a sentiment of helplessness and vulnerability. I don't know what transpired in that moment. The entire chamber seemed to blur, all sound seemed to vanish. When he took a stride forward, the distance between us was nearly eradicated. I didn't retreat. All the intangible boundaries between me and him had vanished in an instant. When it was all concluded, I sat on the chair, my hands trembling uncontrollably. My heart was still pounding, but now the sensation was no longer of conflict, but of profound dread. I couldn't believe what had just transpired. Mr. Jan stood before me, his eyes brimming with shock. "Leah," he commenced, but his voice was choked. "No," I interrupted, my voice trembling. "Don't articulate anything. Don't articulate anything further." I rose, feeling like my legs had no potency left, but I still endeavored to stride swiftly towards the door. As my hand touched the doorknob, he spoke once more, his voice laden with anguish. Leah, I'm apologetic. I'm genuinely apologetic. I didn't turn around, merely quietly exited the chamber. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I was filled with guilt and bewilderment. I didn't know how to confront myself, Aiden, or John following what had just transpired. That night I lay in bed unable to slumber. Images, sentiments, and words haunted my cognition. I pondered, how did matters escalate to this point? How can we confront reality from here? I had no response, and perhaps neither did John. In the ensuing days, I lived in perpetual torment. The notion of divulging everything to Aiden kept lingering in my intellect, but every time I contemplated it, I felt helpless. I knew that if Aiden discovered, the relationship between him and my father would never be the same again. That sacred father-son bond would be obliterated forever. I endeavored to retain everything inside, suppressing the anguish and guilt, but that only rendered me feel more suffocated. I realized that the sole thing I could execute now was to depart this locale. Only that way would halt matters from escalating further and safeguard this family from crumbling. I commenced formulating plans, but I endeavored to preserve a smile on my face, as if everything was typical. I didn't wish Aiden to detect anything amiss prior to mustering the courage to articulate what I desired. Each day I prepared breakfast, cleaned the abode, and smiled as if everything was progressing smoothly, but in my heart, I had made up my mind. One evening post-dinner, as the kinfolk assembled in the sitting room, I awaited a chance to converse. Aiden, I uttered softly, striving to maintain my voice calm. I possess something to impart to you. Aiden gazed up at me, his eyes brimming with concern. What's amiss? Is something amiss? I inhaled deeply, striving to calm myself. I believe we should relocate. We can initiate a fresh life somewhere else. I feel like it would be advantageous for both of us. Aiden froze, his eyebrows furrowed. Relocate? Why do you abruptly desire to execute that? We've been thriving here. Is something amiss? I shook my head, striving to smile reassuringly. Nothing. It's merely I desired us to possess some expanse, and I believe it's time to depart. Aiden placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice grave. Leah, I know something is amiss. You don't necessitate to conceal it from me. Inform me what's amiss. Prior to I could respond, Jan descended the staircase. He had overheard the entire dialogue. Leah is correct, John stated, his voice low but resolute. Aiden, I believe you two should relocate. You and Leah necessitate some expanse to construct your lives. I don't desire to retain you two here indefinitely. Aiden gazed at him, his eyes brimming with surprise. But Dad, I don't desire to depart you. I believe we can still coexist harmoniously. You don't need to fret about me. I'm all right. You and Leah should pursue what's most advantageous for your future. Aiden remained silent for an extended period, his eyes gradually softening. Eventually he nodded. If you assert so, Dad, then I concur. But I will frequently visit you. I uttered nothing, merely bowed my head, experiencing a blend of sorrow and solace. I comprehended why Mr. John assisted me. This was his method of atoning, of preserving this family from disintegration. As night descended, I stood in my chamber gazing out the window with a vacant sensation. I recognized that departing was the correct course of action, yet the anguish and remorse would accompany me wherever I roamed. My narrative imparted a profound lesson. Every error originates from a minor boundary being transgressed. Occasionally, merely a moment of negligence, a moment of frailty can precipitate unforeseeable repercussions. None of us are flawless, but it is the acknowledgement of mistakes, confronting them, and rectifying them that holds significance. Always treasure the relationships surrounding you, especially family. Family serves not only as a sanctuary, but also as a duty to uphold. A single erroneous action can obliterate everything we have constructed over the years. Therefore, remain vigilant, maintain your boundaries, and refrain from allowing your emotions to dominate you. For those in a comparable circumstance, my counsel is to select the action that inflicts the least harm upon all parties. Occasionally, departing is not an evasion but the optimal means to safeguard the individuals you cherish. Learn to relinquish because this not only liberates you, but also aids you in preserving the commendable values you aspire to maintain. I departed that abode bearing with me sorrow and profound insights. Life is a protracted voyage, and I assure myself that I would never stray from the right path again. My tale concludes here. What transpired was the most significant lesson in my life, underscoring the worth of family and accountability. Thank you all for listening, and I aspire for this narrative to assist you in avoiding analogous mistakes.